Welcome back to Novelio. Today is Friday, May 7th, 2021, and I'm continuing on with my reading of Hot Winter Sun, written by Jessica Russell. There was lively conversation at supper that night, as there was a good deal reported by the guests concerning a recent great victory in Cornwall. Our own Sir Richard Grenville has finally taken Restormel Castle back from the Roundheads, the general said. The parliamentarians had no choice but to retreat. Parliamentary soldiers surrendered in groups of thousands at the beginning of September, and villagers even attacked them as they fled. If we could enjoy similar victories throughout England, the king would remain safely on his throne. Despite the massive rejoicing here in Cornwall, though, things are going horribly for the royalist army in other areas. The king's worst mistake was the way he dismissed Parliament and kept governing without one, Robert said. It reminds people of the country's tumultuous history during the 1530s, when Henry VIII took a similar stance, declaring himself the head of the church, although this is not exactly the same. We've accepted quite a bit from His Majesty, but his subjects are now alienated through religion, the latter because of his wife, as well as excessive taxation and its threats to property. The king's popularity is fast waning. He cannot get unwavering support from those whose help he needs to win this war, and still adamantly refuses to compromise in any way with the parliamentarians. But this victory of Greenville's will be a turning point for the king's army, will it not? Catherine asked. I fear it is only victory for Cornwall, Lady Bradshaw, the general said. The rest of the country is in peril. Later that night in the bedchamber, Catherine practically pleaded with Robert to tell her there would be some hope of victory for King Charles. He lay there beside her, idly playing with a piece of her hair, and finally said, I wish I could put your fears to rest, sweetheart, but it looks hopeless. I believe this time next year we may be exiles in France. Oh, how I wish Christopher would return with some news. And I as well, love, Robert sighed, pulling her closely. Catherine had been working on tapestry and went to find Robert when she realized it was almost time for supper. As she made her way to the apartments, she stopped at what the family called a small drawing room. It featured unique windows through which one could see the surrounding meadows in all their beauty. Catherine stared at the stained glass and then moved to the clear part, looking through to the landscape. She recalled scenes from her younger years with both her brother Christopher and her sister Sabrina when life was still a bit more tolerable in the cottage. Lost in thought, she did not hear Julian approach. He had noticed her when he walked past and thought perhaps something was wrong. Are you quite all right, Catherine? She turned from the window. Yes, darling, I was. It's Julian, he said quickly, not wanting her to think he was attempting another deception. I was just noticing that this is the room where winter can be warm. Almost every home has one. Sometimes more than one, Julian frowned as if trying to understand, and Catherine went on. You see, this glass makes the sun feel hot, even if it is chilly outside like today, and it will be the same during winter. Even on the coldest days one can come here and feel some warmth. Julian smiled. A way to have summer during winter, he said, with amusement. Who would have thought of it but you? She studied his face for a moment to see if he was mocking her, and he instantly read her thoughts. I say that with all admiration. I would have never thought of it in a lifetime. Oh, you would have eventually. I doubt that very much, he replied. In truth, he never noticed many of the things she pointed out since she came to the manor. She even recognized a Ming Dynasty jade carving of their mothers that he had to admit he knew nothing about, and he remembered a Hans Holbein portrait that she immediately recognized as being from the Tudor period. Quite a mind in that lovely head, after all. Oh, well, you tried to tell me, Robert. And he was unaware that a small smile was on his lips. Why is Robert so late? She said. Do you know? An issue at one of the cottages, he replied. One of the men is apparently prone to drink and is creating a problem in the neighborhood. Robert went with Lance and some others to tell him he must mend his ways or find a new post. And what does he do here? He is a repairman for all the homes in the village and does quite good at it when the drink does not have him. Another such as Sir Lambert, then? Why can some such as us have a glass of wine or a bit of brandy and behave in a completely normal fashion, and others must drink to excess? Ah, you are philosophizing, he said. For that you must ask someone more intelligent than I. Some seem prone to it from their youth. Now you have set me thinking, and I want the answer myself. Another thing I wonder about is... "Oh, here you are, mistress," Sarah said as she entered the room. Of course, this is the kind of luck I should have. For once I'm attempting normal conversation with the girl, and I'm interrupted by a maid. Oh well, there's naught I can do but excuse myself. "I'll see you at dinner," he said with a smile. "Yes," Catherine replied before turning to Sarah, who had come to ask for one of Carinsa's remedies for headaches that Jennifer was requesting. "Just a little of the one containing Angelica. It's good for these kinds of headaches. Sometimes I think poor Jennifer is a martyr to them." Catherine thought again about how animated and alive Carinsa seemed when working with her plants and brewing her concoctions, but how dull and unlively she made herself in the company of others. She desperately wanted to understand the girl and resolved to speak to Robert about it. She was also curious at Julian's attempt at normal conversation and thought perhaps he was being genuine when he apologized to her in the rose garden for his outlandish behavior. Perhaps he's finally realized that causing such mischief all the time is not creating a harmonious household. Her musings were interrupted by a messenger, however, and she hoped with all her might that it was some word from Christopher, but it was only business matters for the twins. It was always so difficult to know whether something had gone wrong or if it was simply not wise for Christopher to try to send correspondence. Finally, when it became too oppressive in the house, she walked down to Simon Shores in a vain attempt to get her mind off her worries. She crossed the 13th century bridge to the west side and began climbing the cliffs to see if she could exert herself to any extent and remain on her feet. Thinking to herself it was foolish, yet finding it exhilarating, she admired the strange black rock formations and the gently swirling water. She mused at this for a while and then kept on resting when her heart seemed to beat a bit faster. "Oh, Christopher, where are you?" On impulse, she decided to leave the cliff road and walk back along the shore instead. She pictured Christopher clearly when she last met him in the forest to say goodbye. She wanted to beg him to stay, marry, raise a family, and live a simple life, but she knew he had a mission and couldn't interfere. A slight breeze came from the sea, and she walked closer to hear the lapping of the white, foamy waves. Suddenly, feeling exhausted, she scrambled over a long barrier of rock, which went out to the sea and found a cove of sorts. Another unusual barrier was located there in a way that shut in the first. She thought it looked cozy, with its high cliffs on top, and decided to sit for a while and think of something other than Christopher. She considered her last conversation with Julian when he seemed almost pleasant. She remembered long ago when she was younger and fancied herself in love with the twins and unable to choose between them, although that seemed almost humorous now, as her love for Robert was so deep and strong. Unknown to her, she would have had such agony for many years had Julian not emerged as the more forceful of the two. All she knew was that he made her tense and unnerved, while with Robert she felt cared for and safe. Suddenly she saw the light receding and realized it was time to go. Being unaware of how long she had been so completely absorbed in her thoughts, she rose and went to the barrier rock and was about to climb over it when, to her dismay, saw that the tide had come in as she sat there daydreaming. With a start, it occurred to her that the cove was on much higher ground than the shoreline on either edge of the rocks, and she would be in waist-high water if she stepped past them. The sea was splashing violently on the rocks on the other side, and even the cove now only had one paltry strip of dry land. She could not make her way along the beach, as the tide was coming in a rapid pace, and she knew the cove would shortly fill. She was a good swimmer, although her heart would not allow her to swim for long, and suddenly she was terrified. I've allowed a trap to form around me. She looked at her surroundings in dismay, but the threatening sea was slowly creeping in to ensnare her in the cove. Suddenly she heard a voice, which filled her with relief. She knew it was Julian or Robert. "What are you doing down there, girl?" Julian hollered to her. She gazed above her and saw him standing on the cliff path looking down. "The tide has cut me off," she cried. "You cannot remain there. In less than 5 minutes the cove will flood." "What should I do?" she hollered back, now in a full-blown panic, but he was gone. "Is he leaving me to drown?" "Catherine!" The voice came from the right of her, and she spun around abruptly. "Give me your hand," he demanded. Yet she remained frozen in place, still nursing an irrational fear of the man. "Are you mad, woman? Give me your hand at once," he shouted. She obeyed, and he maneuvered her over the wet rocks tediously and methodically. She was amazed at his strength and agility, for he had to step backwards throughout the whole episode, and he still managed to keep not only his balance but hers as well. He was fearless, taking each step as if he believed the rocks would not dare presume to let him fall. She felt her lungs begin to burn and her heart beat quicken. "Almost there, Kathy," he said, suddenly sensing her distress. When they were safely on the beach, she dropped to her knees, struggling to catch her breath. He took off his cloak and flung it about her. "Can you breathe, Catherine? You seem as if you were about to faint. I'm just going a short distance for my horse, and I will be back to take you home." She felt as if it were hours, but he was back in a matter of moments, pulling her to her feet. "Here now, I shall put you up first, and then I'll mount." "Where will you take me?" she cried. "Don't be ridiculous. I shall take you home. You can't truly think that I'm that evil." He mounted the horse behind her, and she sighed, overcome with weariness. "This is not how I fancied getting you willingly into my arms. You're willing at this moment, of course, but for the wrong reason." He laughed and commanded the horse a faster pace. "Julian, please!" She seemed ready to burst into tears. "Don't worry, my bewitching little temptress. I'll not take advantage, though I'd like to. Instead, I shall take you home to bed." "Robert's bed?" He laughed again loudly. "And I hope you don't repeat this nonsense, for that part is not funny." "No, I shan't. I'm a stupid girl, it seems." "Nay, just a reckless one," he said. Her head hung in weariness, and she drew another labored breath. "Lean on me, Catherine," he said. "Seriously, I shall take no advantage, I promise." "That is hard to believe of you." "What terrible thanks for one who has just saved your life." "I'm surprised you bothered," she replied. He laughed again and tightened his arms around her as another swift gale swept over them. "My saintly brother would be appalled at your lack of manners." What of your manners? Trying to seduce his wife right under his nose." He would laugh. "There you are mistaken. He would be very angry." "Nay, he knows I would not betray him." "As if I would." "Yes, but surely you have a burning curiosity about what it would be like to be married to me instead of him. Do you ever wonder how we might compare as lovers? You are obsessed with yourself and your supposed charms. You can only be polite for so long until you go back to your former ways. I was silly to think you had changed." He felt her shiver uncontrollably and hoped she would not become ill from the escapade. "I'm sorry, Kathy. Please rest on me. I shan't bite you." "I believe my heart would not have held out much longer," she said. "How did you happen to be so close?" "Why say such a thing as that? You're young and healthy." He was instantly alert. He vaguely remembered Jennifer telling him about some heart condition of Catherine's, but he had dismissed it as female hysteria and erroneously assumed it was mostly exaggerated. "Nay, this affliction menaces me. My mother and hers both died young from it. No one knows how long it shall be for me." "They died? How young?" he asked hesitantly. "My grandmother 38 and my mother 43. "That mayhap I have only a decade or two more to seduce you. Your actions make me think I will need longer." "You are the devil himself, Julian, and I hate you," she said, and he was suddenly sorry. "No, I don't mean to make light of it, Catherine. Don't upset yourself. I just will not believe it. I'm sorry about your mother, and I didn't mean to be so boorish. However, you shall outlive me. This is a fact," he said with fervor. "Oh, now you are God to decide who lives and for how long. I want to forget it entirely. It's too unpleasant a thought." "Do let's then, Julian. I am so cold." "We're almost there, Kathy. We shall get you warm. I believe I see Robert already."